They say you can survive anything except being invisible in your own home. Clara Whitmore learned that lesson the hard way. 2 years married to a man who looked through her like she was made of glass. Duke Adrian Blackwell loved a ghost more than his living wife. But on one rain-soaked night, when Clara heard him whisper another woman's name in his sleep, something inside her finally broke. Or maybe for the first time it came alive. Stick with us until the end to see how one woman's decision to walk away changed everything. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. The east wing of Iron Ridge Manor was always cold. Clara had noticed it the first week she'd arrived as a bride, back when she still believed that time and patience could thaw a frozen marriage. Now, 2 years later, she understood the truth. The cold wasn't in the stones. It was in the silence. She stood at the window of her chambers, watching the November fog roll across the estate grounds like a living thing. Beyond the manicured gardens and the ancient oak trees, she could see the lights of the village, warm and distant. A world she no longer belonged to, a world she'd left behind the day she became the Duchess of Blackwell. Behind her, the bedroom was empty. It was always empty. Adrian hadn't stepped foot in her chambers since their wedding night, a night that had been nothing but a cold, perfunctory execution of duty. He'd done what was required, said nothing, and left before dawn. She'd lain there alone in the dark, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall, and told herself it would get better. It never did. "Your Grace, shall I draw your bath?" Clara turned to find Mary, her lady's maid, hovering in the doorway. The girl's eyes were kind but cautious. Everyone in the household had learned to tread carefully around the Duke's invisible wife. "Not yet," Clara said softly. "I'll ring when I'm ready." Mary curtsied and disappeared, leaving Clara alone again. Always alone. She caught a reflection in the mirror, a woman of 24 who looked like she'd been carved from wax. Pale skin, dark hair pulled back in a severe style she'd adopted because Adrian never looked at her anyway. So what did it matter? The deep green gown she wore was expensive but joyless. Everything about her had become joyless. She touched the wedding ring on her finger, a band of gold that felt heavier every day. The dinner bell echoed through the manor, and Clara's stomach knotted. Dinner. The worst hour of every day. She made her way down the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous hallway. Oil paintings of Adrian's ancestors stared down at her with cold judgment. None of them were smiling. The Blackwells didn't smile. The dining room was a cavern of dark wood and flickering candlelight. The table could seat 30, but tonight, as every night, only 2 places were set, one at the head, one far down the side. An ocean of polished mahogany between them. Adrian was already seated. He didn't look up when she entered. Clara took her place, smoothing her napkin across her lap, while servants moved like shadows, placing dishes in front of them. Roasted pheasant, root vegetables, wine she wouldn't drink because what was the point of dulling pain that never went away? 5 minutes passed in total silence, then 10. Clara cut her meat into small, precise pieces. Adrian did the same. They were both performing a play neither of them wanted to be in, reading lines that didn't exist. "How was your day?" she finally asked, hating the sound of her own voice, too hopeful, too desperate. Adrian's fork paused for half a second. "Fine." One word, that was all she'd get. "I was thinking," Clara continued, fighting against the weight pressing down on her chest. "Perhaps we could ride out to the southern woods tomorrow. The weather might hold, and I have business in London." "Oh," she swallowed. "When will you return?" "A week. Perhaps 2. Perhaps 2. He couldn't even be bothered to know when he'd return to his own home. Or maybe he knew exactly, and the vagueness was just another way to keep her at a distance. "I see." More silence. The servants brought dessert, some kind of tart Clara didn't taste. She pushed it around her plate while Adrian finished his wine. "I'll be leaving before dawn," he said, standing. "Don't wait up." "I never do," Clara said, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd heard, but he was already walking away. She sat there alone in that massive dining room, staring at the empty chair where her husband had been. The candles flickered. Somewhere in the manor, a clock chimed 9 times. The servants cleared the dishes around her as if she were a statue. When she finally returned to her chambers, Clara dismissed Mary for the night and stood in the center of the room, looking at the 4-poster bed that had never felt like hers. Nothing in this house felt like hers. Not the furniture, not the clothes in the wardrobe, not the title she carried. She was a duchess in name only, a decoration, a formality, a signature on a contract signed by families who'd cared more about land rights than human hearts. Clara walked to her writing desk and pulled out the letters she'd written to her mother in the first months of marriage, letters full of false cheer and careful lies. Everything is wonderful. The manner is beautiful. Adrian is kind. She'd stopped writing after a while. Even lies required energy she didn't have. Beneath the letters was her old sketchbook. Her breath caught. She'd forgotten about it. Clara opened it with trembling hands, and there they were, her drawings from before the engagement, before the wedding, before she'd buried herself alive in this tomb of a marriage. Charcoal sketches of the woods near her family's estate, the market square, the faces of people who'd actually seen her. The lines were confident, alive, full of a joy she barely recognized. When had she stopped drawing? She couldn't remember. A sound made her freeze, footsteps in the hallway, moving past her door without stopping. Adrian, heading to his own chambers. She waited, listening to him close his door, listening to the house settle into its nightly silence. Then she heard it. At first, Clara thought she was imagining things. But no, it was real. It was a voice, muffled through the walls. Adrian's voice. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. He was talking to someone. No, not talking. He was in his room alone. She would have heard if someone had arrived, which meant he was... Her heart went cold. He was talking in his sleep. Clara shouldn't have done it. She knew she shouldn't, but her feet carried her into the hallway anyway, drawn by some terrible need to understand the man who'd become her warden. She stopped outside Adrian's door, her hand hovering over the handle. The voice came again, clearer now. "Eleanor? Eleanor, please don't go." The name hit Clara like a physical blow. Eleanor. She'd heard whispers about her from the servants, careful, pitying whispers that stopped whenever Clara entered a room. Eleanor Ashford, the woman Adrian had loved before his family had forced him into a marriage of convenience. The woman who died in a riding accident 3 years ago, leaving Adrian a shell of whatever he'd been before. Clara had known, in the abstract, that Adrian's heart belonged to a ghost, but hearing him say her name, hearing the raw grief in his voice, even in sleep, made it unbearably real. She stood there in the dark hallway, listening to her husband mourn another woman, and something inside her cracked. Not broke, not yet, but cracked. Clara returned to her room and locked the door behind her. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands, at the gold ring that suddenly felt like a shackle. 2 years. 2 years of silent dinners and empty beds and pretending that patience would eventually be rewarded. 2 years of making herself smaller and quieter, hoping that if she just didn't take up too much space, Adrian might eventually notice she existed. But he wouldn't. He never would. Because to Adrian, Clara wasn't a person. She was an obligation, a duty, a placeholder for a woman who would never come back. The tears came then, hot and bitter. Clara pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sound, not wanting anyone to hear. She'd gotten good at crying silently, another skill she'd learned in this house. But beneath the tears, something else was growing. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. Something colder, harder. Clara stood and walked to the mirror, really looking at herself for the first time in months. Who was this pale ghost staring back at her? When had she become so erased? She thought of her mother's words on her wedding day. Marriage is about compromise, Clara, about becoming part of something larger than yourself. But what if larger just meant invisible? What if compromise was just another word for disappearing? Clara touched the ring on her finger, twisting it slowly. In her family, this ring had meant forever, security, partnership. But Adrian had never wanted a partner. He'd wanted to be left alone with his grief. And her family had sold her to him anyway, because the Blackwell name and fortune were too good to pass up. She'd been a transaction, a merger of estates, and she'd accepted it because good daughters didn't question their parents. Good wives didn't demand more than they were given. Good women made do. But making do was killing her. Outside, the November wind howled against the windows. Storm clouds were gathering. She could smell the rain coming. The manor creaked and settled around her like a living thing, cold and indifferent. Clara thought about the next morning. Adrian would leave for London without saying goodbye. She would spend another week or two alone in this enormous house, wandering halls like a ghost, eating silent dinners, sleeping in a bed that felt like a coffin. And when he returned, nothing would change, unless she changed it. The thought was so sudden, so clear, that it almost knocked her backward. What if she just stopped? Stopped pretending? Stopped hoping? Stopped making herself small? Stopped waiting for a man who would never see her to suddenly wake up and notice she was drowning? What if she took off the ring? Clara's heart pounded. It was a radical thought, shocking even. A married woman didn't just remove her wedding ring. It was a symbol of everything, of commitment, of vows, of permanent binding. Taking it off would be a declaration, but a declaration of what? Freedom. The word sang through her like a bell. Clara looked at her reflection again, and this time she didn't see a ghost. She saw a woman who'd been buried alive and was finally clawing her way to the surface. She twisted the ring, feeling the metal scrape against her knuckle. It had fit perfectly on her wedding day. Now it felt loose, or maybe she'd just worn away at herself so much that everything was loose. Nothing fit right anymore. She pulled. The ring slid off. Clara stared at it in her palm, this circle of gold that had promised everything and delivered nothing. Her finger felt naked without it. Strange. Lighter. She walked to her jewelry box and placed the ring inside, closing the lid with a soft click. Then she sat down at her desk, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. Not a letter to her mother, not an appeal to Adrian, but something else entirely. A list. Things I will no longer do. Wait for him to notice me. Dress to please someone who doesn't look. Eat silent dinners pretending everything is fine. Make myself smaller to fit into his grief. Accept invisibility as my permanent state. Her hand moved faster, words spilling out like a dam had broken. Things I will do. Dress for myself. Paint again. Go into society without asking permission. Speak when I have something to say. Take up space. Exist loudly. When she finished, Clara read the list over 3 times. Each word felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd thought was lost forever. Outside, the rain began, fat drops hitting the windows like thrown stones. The storm had finally arrived. Clara folded the list and tucked it into her sketchbook, then extinguished the candles and climbed into bed. But she didn't sleep. She lay there in the darkness, listening to the rain, feeling the bare skin of her ring finger, and thought about all the ways a person could survive, and all the ways they could choose not to. By the time dawn broke, Adrian was gone. Clara heard his carriage leave, heard the gravel crunch under the wheels, heard the sound fade into silence. She didn't get up to watch him go. Instead, she rang for Mary and said something she'd never said before. Bring me my old clothes from storage, the ones I wore before the wedding, and send for the dressmaker. Tell her I'll need a complete new wardrobe. Nothing like what I have now. Something bolder. Mary's eyes widened. Your Grace? And Mary? Clara met the girl's startled gaze. Don't call me Your Grace when we're alone. My name is Clara. For the first time in 2 years, she smiled. It felt like breaking a curse. The dressmaker arrived 3 days later, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Delacroix, who'd made gowns for half the aristocracy in London. She took one look at Clara's current wardrobe and wrinkled her nose. Dreadful, she pronounced, holding up one of the dove-gray dresses Clara had worn to last month's dinner. Who told you to dress like a nun at a funeral? Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I thought subdued colors were appropriate for disappearing, perhaps. Mrs. Delacroix tossed the dress aside. But you didn't hire me to make you invisible, did you? No, Clara said, the word coming out stronger than she'd expected. No, I didn't. Good, then we understand each other. Over the next 2 hours, Mrs. Delacroix measured and sketched while Clara described what she wanted. Not what she thought she should want, but what she actually wanted. Deep emerald silks, sapphire velvets, a riding habit in burgundy instead of black, evening gowns with actual personality instead of the shapeless, colorless things she'd been wearing. You want to be noticed, Mrs. Delacroix said, not as a question. Clara met her eyes. I want to exist. Ah, the dressmaker smiled. That's different. Better. Existing requires courage, Your Grace. Most women aren't brave enough. After Mrs. Delacroix left, Clara stood in her chamber feeling like she'd just declared war, which, in a way, she had. Not against Adrian specifically, but against the entire silent agreement that had defined their marriage. The agreement that said she should accept her role as decoration, should be grateful for the title and the money, should never ask for anything as inconvenient as being seen. She pulled out her old sketchbook and opened to a blank page. Her hand shook as she picked up the charcoal. It had been so long. But the moment the black dust touched paper, something unlocked inside her. She drew the view from her window, then the twisted oak tree in the garden, then Mary's face from memory, capturing the kind caution in her eyes. The drawings were rough, unpracticed, but they were hers. For the first time in 2 years, Clara was creating something that had nothing to do with being the perfect, invisible Duchess. Your Grace? Clara looked up to find Mary in the doorway, worry creasing her young face. Yes? The servants are... They're talking. Mary twisted her apron. About the dressmaker, and how you've asked for the east parlor to be cleared and set up as a studio, and... She hesitated. And what? Your ring, ma'am. They've noticed you're not wearing it. Clara glanced down at her bare finger. The staff had eyes everywhere. Of course they'd noticed. In a house this silent, every small change echoed like thunder. Let them talk, Clara said quietly. But when the Duke returns, he'll find things different. And if he doesn't like it, that's his concern, not mine. Mary's eyes went wide, but she nodded and hurried away. Clara knew the girl would repeat every word to the other servants. Good. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. She was done performing for an audience that never applauded anyway. The days began to take on a new rhythm. Clara woke early and painted in her makeshift studio, capturing the way morning light fell across the grounds, the sharp angles of the manor's architecture, the twisted beauty of winter-bare trees. She took long walks through the estate without asking anyone's permission, striding across frozen fields in her old boots while the cold air burned her lungs and made her feel alive. She stopped taking meals in the formal dining room. Instead, she had them brought to the smaller breakfast room, where she could eat in peace without staring at Adrian's empty chair. She started reading again, not the boring histories she'd forced herself through to seem educated, but novels. Scandalous ones, romantic ones. Books that reminded her that life could be more than elegant suffering, and slowly, cautiously, she began accepting social invitations she'd declined for 2 years. The first was tea with Lady Patricia Thornwood, a widow in her 50s who lived 3 miles away and had a reputation for being too outspoken. Clara had avoided her before, worried that Adrian would disapprove. Now she didn't care. Well, Lady Patricia said when Clara arrived, looking her over with shrewd blue eyes, you're different. Clara settled into the offered chair. Different how? Alive, like last time I saw you was at the Havisham Ball last spring. You looked like you were attending your own execution. Lady Patricia poured tea without waiting for servants to do it. What changed? Clara thought about lying, offering some polite deflection. But what was the point? I got tired of dying slowly. Lady Patricia's laugh was sharp and genuine. Good girl, I was wondering when you'd wake up. That husband of yours is a fool, you know. Yes, Clara said simply. I know. They talked for 3 hours. Lady Patricia told stories about her own marriage, a passionate disaster that had ended when her husband died in a duel over another woman. But before that, she said, eyes bright with memory, we had 10 years of spectacular arguments and even better reconciliations. I wouldn't trade those years for anything. Better to feel too much than nothing at all. Clara thought about Adrian, who felt nothing for her and everything for a ghost. I don't think I can make him love me, she said quietly. Then stop trying. Lady Patricia leaned forward. Love can't be earned through good behavior like a trained dog gets treats. Either it exists or it doesn't. Your job isn't to win his love. Your job is to build a life worth living regardless. The words settled into Clara like stones in deep water. Build a life worth living regardless. She rode home as the sun set, her mind churning. When had she started believing that her entire existence should revolve around making Adrian notice her? When had she accepted that his indifference defined her worth? The answer was the moment she'd put on that wedding ring and stepped into Iron Ridge Manor as his wife. But she'd taken off the ring, and she could take off the invisible chains too. That night, Clara wrote letters, real ones, not the careful lies she'd sent her mother before. She wrote to old friends she'd lost touch with, to distant cousins, to anyone who might remember the person she'd been before she became the ghost Duchess. She invited them to visit, to stay, to fill this enormous, silent house with voices and laughter and life. Half of them would probably decline. But even if a few came, it would be something. It would be people who saw her. A week passed, then 10 days. Adrian's week, perhaps 2, stretched longer, as Clara had known it would. She didn't write to him, didn't ask when he'd return, let him stay in London forever if he wanted. She had things to do. The new dresses arrived in a flurry of tissue paper and ribbon. Clara tried them on alone in her chamber, turning in front of the mirror and barely recognizing herself. The woman staring back wore emerald silk that brought out the green in her hazel eyes. Her dark hair, freed from its severe style, fell in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked vibrant, real. "You're in there somewhere," she whispered to her reflection. "I haven't forgotten you." The next day, she wore the emerald dress to tea with Lady Patricia and 2 other women from the county, Mrs. Eliza Pemberton and Miss Anne Fairfield, both of whom had been polite but distant before. Now they looked at Clara with open curiosity. "I heard you've been painting," Eliza said, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp. "I didn't know you had artistic inclinations." "I'd forgotten I had them," Clara replied. "It's easy to forget things in a quiet house." Anne, who was younger and unmarried, leaned forward eagerly. "Could we see your work? I love art, but I have no talent for it myself." Clara hesitated. Her paintings were raw, unpolished, full of the messy emotions she'd been suppressing. Showing them felt dangerous, but dangerous was better than invisible. "Come to Iron Ridge tomorrow," she said. "I'll show you." They came. All 3 of them, arriving in the afternoon when the light was best in her studio. Clara's hands shook as she unveiled her work, a dozen canvases showing the estate in winter, the bare trees, the cold gray sky, the manor itself rendered in sharp, almost angry brushstrokes. Lady Patricia studied them in silence for a long moment. "These are extraordinary," she finally said. "Angry, but extraordinary." "They're honest," Eliza added quietly. "That's rarer than extraordinary." Anne touched the edge of one canvas showing the dining room, empty except for 2 place settings impossibly far apart. "This one hurts to look at." "Good," Clara said. "It hurt to live it." Word spread faster than Clara had anticipated. Within days, half the county knew that the Duchess of Blackwell was painting, hosting visitors, and walking around without her wedding ring. The whispers followed her everywhere, to the village shops, to church, to every social gathering. Most of the whispers were scandalized. "Disgraceful," Mrs. Haversham pronounced at the next county assembly, loud enough for Clara to hear. "A married woman removing her ring. What kind of message does that send?" Clara, standing 10 feet away in her new sapphire gown, met the old woman's eyes directly. An honest one. The room went silent. Mrs. Haversham's face turned purple. "How dare you? How dare I what? Stop pretending my marriage is something it isn't." Clara's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "My husband hasn't spoken more than 20 words to me in 2 years. I've eaten dinner alone in a house full of servants. I've spent every day invisible to the one person who should see me. So yes, I took off my ring. And if you have a problem with that, Mrs. Haversham, you're welcome to take it up with the Duke when he bothers to come home." She turned and walked away, heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Behind her, the whispers exploded, louder, sharper, but Clara didn't stop. She kept walking until she was outside in the cold night air, gasping like she'd just run a mile. Lady Patricia appeared beside her, pressing a flask into her hand. "Drink." Clara drank. Brandy burned down her throat, warming her from the inside. "That was either very brave or very stupid," Patricia said. "Probably both. Definitely both. But well done anyway." Patricia took the flask back and drank herself. "You know they'll tear you apart for this. Society doesn't like women who stop following the rules." "I know." And your husband will hear about it. Someone will make sure of that. I hope so, Clara said, surprising herself. I hope someone writes him a letter describing every scandalous thing I've done. I hope it ruins his breakfast. Patricia laughed, a wild, delighted sound. Oh, I like this version of you much better. But not everyone did. Over the next week, 3 families who'd sent acceptances to Clara's invitations wrote back with polite excuses. The vicar's wife stopped acknowledging her at church. Even some of the servants began treating her with cool formality, as if she'd committed some unforgivable sin. Only Mary stayed loyal, and even she looked worried. Your Grace, Clara, she corrected herself quickly. The housekeeper says people are talking, saying you've gone mad, or that you're trying to shame the Duke, or that you're Say it, Clara said gently, that you're preparing to leave him. Clara looked out her window at the grounds she'd come to know by heart. Leave Adrian? The thought had crossed her mind, but leaving felt like running, and Clara was tired of running, even if she'd spent the last 2 years running in place, going nowhere. I'm not leaving, she said. I'm staying. But I'm staying as myself, not as his ghost. Mary nodded, though she still looked uncertain. Clara didn't blame her. Even she wasn't sure this would work. But doing nothing had been killing her, so at least this was action. At least this was choice. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Clara recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. She almost didn't open it, knowing what it would say. But cowardice was a habit she was trying to break, so she broke the seal. Dearest Clara, I have heard the most distressing rumors about your conduct. Mrs. Havisham was kind enough to write me with her concerns about your state of mind. She says you have removed your wedding ring and are behaving in ways unbefitting a duchess. Clara, I don't understand what has possessed you. You have everything a woman could want. A title, a fortune, security. Why would you jeopardize that with such reckless behavior? Your father and I arranged this marriage because we wanted the best for you. The Blackwell name is beyond reproach. Whatever problems you're having with the Duke, they can be smoothed over with patience and discretion. That is what marriage requires, darling. Not dramatic gestures that will only make you look hysterical. Please, for your own sake, put your ring back on and apologize to anyone you've offended. These things can still be repaired if you act quickly. Your loving mother Clara read it twice, then set it on her desk and stared at it. Her mother didn't ask if she was happy, didn't ask what had driven her to such reckless behavior, didn't even consider that maybe Clara had good reasons for everything she'd done. All that mattered was appearance, reputation, not rocking the boat. Clara picked up her pen and wrote back, Dear Mother, I am not hysterical, and I will not apologize for refusing to be invisible anymore. If that makes me unsuitable as a duchess, then perhaps I was never suited for the role to begin with. Tell Mrs. Havisham that my state of mind is none of her concern. Clara. She sealed it and sent it before she could second-guess herself. That night, unable to sleep, Clara wandered the manor's halls. She'd avoided certain rooms for 2 years, Adrian's study, his private library, the portrait gallery where Eleanor's painting hung. Now she walked through them all, a trespasser in her own home. Adrian's study was exactly as she'd imagined, neat, cold, impersonal. Books about estate management and law. A desk with no personal effects. It told her nothing about the man who used it. The library was different. Here, finally, were signs of life. Books pulled from shelves and left stacked on tables, a blanket draped over a reading chair, a half-empty glass of whiskey with a ring stain on the wood. This was where Adrian spent his time when he was home. This was where he hid from her. Clara picked up one of the books. Poetry. She opened it and found a passage underlined. I have been half in love with easeful death. Of course, even his reading was about grief. She closed the book and moved to the portrait gallery, and there, at the end of the hall, was Eleanor. The painting was beautiful. Clara had to admit that. Eleanor had been lovely, with golden hair and laughing blue eyes, captured in a moment of pure joy. She wore a riding habit and held the reins of a white horse, her whole face lit up with life. Clara stood in front of the portrait for a long time, studying the woman Adrian loved more than he could ever love her. You're dead, she said aloud, her voice echoing in the empty gallery. You've been dead for 3 years, and he still chooses you over me. How do I compete with a memory? The painted Eleanor smiled back, frozen in permanent happiness. I can't, Clara answered herself. That's the point. I was never supposed to compete. I was supposed to accept my place and be grateful for scraps. But she wasn't grateful anymore. Clara turned away from the portrait and walked back to her chambers. She didn't feel angry. Anger was too hot, too temporary. This was something colder, more permanent. This was clarity. The next morning, she made a decision that would change everything. She was going to throw a ball. Lady Patricia nearly choked on her tea when Clara announced it. A ball at Iron Ridge without the Duke present? Exactly, Clara said calmly. If I wait for Adrian to come home and approve, I'll wait forever. This is my home too. I have the right to entertain in it. Clara, Patricia set down her cup carefully. This will cause an enormous scandal. Hostessing a ball without your husband's knowledge or permission, society will crucify you. Let them try. Clara met her friend's eyes. I've been invisible for 2 years. If I'm going to be talked about anyway, I might as well give them something real to discuss. Patricia studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. You're absolutely mad. Probably. I love it. When? 3 weeks. That gives us time to prepare and send invitations. I want everyone to come. Everyone who's been whispering about me. Everyone who thinks I'm crazy. Everyone who wants to see what the ghost Duchess will do next. And if they come expecting to watch you fail? Clara smiled, a real smile, sharp and fearless. Then I'll surprise them. The preparations consumed the next 3 weeks. Clara threw herself into every detail with an intensity that surprised even her. She chose the menu, approved the decorations, selected the musicians. She had the ballroom, unused since Adrian's parents had died, opened and cleaned and filled with flowers. She sent invitations to every family in the county and beyond, including several London society families who'd probably ignore them. The staff watched her with varying degrees of confusion and concern. The housekeeper, Mrs. Dawson, tried to argue. Your Grace, shouldn't we wait for the Duke's approval? He's never mentioned wanting to host. The Duke isn't here, Clara said firmly. I am, and I'm hosting this ball. If you're unwilling to help, I'll hire staff who are. Mrs. Dawson's lips thinned, but she nodded. Clara knew she'd complain to Adrian the moment he returned, but that was a problem for later. Right now, Clara had a ball to orchestrate. Responses to the invitations trickled in. More acceptances than Clara had expected. Curiosity, she knew, more than genuine approval. People wanted to see what she'd do. Wanted to witness her either triumph or fall apart. Either way, they'd be watching. Finally, someone would be watching. 5 days before the ball, Clara received a letter that made her blood run cold. Not from Adrian, she still hadn't heard from him, but from his secretary in London. Your Grace, the Duke of Blackwell has been informed of your plans to host a ball at Iron Ridge Manor. He wishes me to convey that he finds this highly inappropriate and requests you cancel the event immediately. His Grace will return at the end of the month to discuss this matter with you personally. Clara read it 3 times, then crumpled it and threw it in the fire. Clara? Mary had entered quietly. What was that? Nothing important. Clara watched the paper burn. The ball is still happening. Start pressing my gown. The night before the ball, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, second-guessing everything. What if no one came? What if they came but left early? What if she'd made a terrible mistake? But then she thought about the alternative, crawling back into invisibility, putting her ring back on, apologizing to people who'd never cared about her happiness, going back to silent dinners and empty beds and slow suffocation. No. Better to fail spectacularly than to keep dying quietly. The day of the ball arrived cold and clear. Clara dressed carefully in a gown of midnight blue silk that Mrs. Delacroix had called her masterpiece. It was beautiful and bold, making Clara look like someone worth noticing. She left her hair down in soft curls, wore her mother's pearl necklace, and stared at her bare ring finger for a long moment before deciding to leave it bare. This was who she was now, someone who'd stopped apologizing for existing. The first guests arrived at 7, then more, then more. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was full. Not just with local families, but with people who'd traveled from London, from the neighboring counties, drawn by curiosity and gossip and the scandalous novelty of a duchess hosting without her husband. Clara stood at the entrance greeting them, and for the first time in 2 years, people really looked at her. Some with approval, some with judgment, but all of them looked. Lady Patricia appeared at her elbow, resplendent in emerald silk. "You did it." "They came," Clara breathed. "Of course they came. No one could resist this." The evening unfolded like a fever dream. Clara danced with men she'd barely spoken to before. She laughed, actually laughed, at jokes and stories. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, assessing, judging, but also seeing her. But halfway through the night, as Clara was catching her breath between dances, she noticed a disturbance near the entrance. Whispers spreading like wildfire, heads turning. And then the crowd parted. Adrian stood in the doorway, still in his traveling clothes, his dark eyes scanning the ballroom until they found her. He'd come home. Clara's heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Around her, the music faltered, conversations died. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what would happen when the ghost Duchess faced her phantom husband. Adrian's eyes moved from her face to her bare ring finger. His expression went from shock to something darker. Clara lifted her chin and held his gaze. She didn't smile, didn't apologize, didn't bow. She just stood there, in her midnight blue gown, surrounded by people who finally saw her, and waited for the world to either end or begin. Adrian moved through the crowd like a storm cutting through still water. People stepped aside without being asked, their faces a mixture of fascination and dread. The musicians had stopped playing entirely now. 200 guests held their collective breath. Clara watched him approach, every instinct screaming at her to run or apologize or do something to diffuse the rage she could see building in his dark eyes. But she'd spent 2 years making herself small for this man. She wouldn't do it anymore. He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the dust from his journey still clinging to his coat, the exhaustion in his face, the muscle jumping in his jaw. "What?" Adrian said quietly, dangerously, "is this?" Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "A ball." "I can see it's a ball. I'm asking why my home is full of strangers and my wife is hosting without my knowledge or permission." "Your home," Clara repeated. "Not our home? That's interesting." His eyes narrowed. "Don't play word games with me. I sent explicit instructions to cancel this event. I received your secretary's letter. I disagreed with its contents." A murmur rippled through the watching crowd. People pretended to look away, but no one was actually leaving. This was better than theater. Adrian's voice dropped even lower. "We will discuss this in private. Now." "No." The single word hung in the air like a grenade. Adrian stared at her. "What did you just say?" "I said no. These are my guests. I won't abandon them because you've suddenly decided to notice I exist." His hand shot out and gripped her arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make his point. "You will come with me immediately, or I swear—" "Or you'll what?" Clara pulled free, her voice rising enough for people nearby to hear. "Drag me out of my own ballroom? Lock me in my chambers? Remind everyone here that I'm not actually a person, just a possession you misplaced?" Adrian went pale. Around them, the whispers grew louder. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "Good. I've been invisible for 2 years. At least now people know I'm here." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Two people who'd shared a name and a house, but never a life. Clara could see something working behind Adrian's eyes, some calculation she couldn't quite read. Then he stepped back. "Fine," he said, his voice cold as winter stone. "Enjoy your ball, Your Grace. We'll speak when your guests have gone." He turned and walked away, disappearing through a side door. The crowd exhaled collectively. Within seconds, the whispers exploded into full conversations. Clara stood frozen, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Lady Patricia materialized at her side. "Well, that was spectacular. I think I'm going to be sick." "Later. Right now, you're going to smile and dance and act like nothing unusual just happened. Because if you fall apart now, everyone will say you were hysterical. But if you stay composed, they'll say you were brave." Clara wanted to argue, but Patricia was right. She'd started this. She had to finish it. So she smiled. requested the musicians resume, accepted the next dance from Lord Pemberton, who looked at her with something like respect. And for the next 2 hours, Clara played the perfect hostess, while her marriage crumbled around her like a building in an earthquake. The guests didn't leave until well past midnight. Most lingered, hoping for more drama. Clara disappointed them by remaining gracious and composed until the very last carriage pulled away. The moment the door closed, her knees buckled. Mary caught her. "I've got you. Come on." They made it halfway to Clara's chambers before Adrian appeared at the top of the stairs. "Leave us," he told Mary. The maid looked to Clara, who nodded. Mary squeezed her hand once, then fled. Clara forced herself to straighten, to face her husband. In the dim lamplight, Adrian looked like a stranger, or maybe she was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. "My study," he said. "Now." Clara followed him down the hall, each step feeling like walking to an execution. Adrian's study was exactly as she remembered, cold, impersonal, unwelcoming. He closed the door behind them with a sharp click. "Sit." "I'll stand." Adrian's jaw clenched. "You've been busy in my absence." "Your absence has been the theme of our marriage. I simply stopped waiting for you to return to it." "Is that what you call this?" He gestured broadly, anger finally breaking through his controlled exterior. "Throwing parties behind my back? Parading yourself in front of half the county? Removing your wedding ring like our marriage means nothing?" "It does mean nothing." The words came out flat, honest. "It's meant nothing from the beginning. You made sure of that. I gave you everything. You gave me a title and a house and absolutely nothing else." Clara's voice cracked but didn't break. "You gave me 2 years of silence, 2 years of eating dinner alone while you sat at the other end of a table that might as well have been a canyon. 2 years of wondering what I'd done wrong, why I wasn't worth even basic courtesy. So forgive me if I stopped pretending that this marriage is anything more than a legal document." Adrian stared at her, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, that she'd actually said it out loud. "You knew what this marriage was when you agreed to it," he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. "I knew it was arranged. I didn't know it would be a tomb." "That's dramatic." "Is it?" Clara stepped closer. "Tell me, Adrian, when was the last time you looked at me? Actually looked? Not just glanced past me like I'm part of the furniture?" He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't answer. "That's what I thought." Clara felt something break loose inside her chest. Not grief anymore, but something fiercer. "I'm 24 years old. I've been in this house for 2 years, and I can count on one hand the number of real conversations we've had. You don't know what books I read. You don't know that I paint. You don't know that I've been slowly dying in this beautiful prison you built around me. I never asked you to. You never asked me anything." The words burst out of her, too loud, too raw, but she couldn't stop now. "You never asked what I wanted or needed or dreamed about. You married me because your family required an heir and my family's land bordered yours. You put a ring on my finger and thought that was enough. Well, it's not enough. It was never enough." Adrian's face had gone white. "You're hysterical. Stop calling me hysterical just because I'm finally telling the truth." Clara's hands were shaking, but she kept them at her sides. "I'm not hysterical. I'm furious. I'm heartbroken. I'm exhausted from pretending that this is a real marriage instead of a cage with silk walls." "Then what do you want?" Adrian shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. "You want me to fall to my knees and beg forgiveness? You want pretty words and flowers and romantic gestures? I can't give you those things. I don't have them to give." "I know you don't." Clara's voice went quiet again. "Because you gave them all to Eleanor." The name landed between them like a bomb. Adrian went absolutely still. "Don't." "Don't what? Don't say her name? Don't acknowledge that your dead lover is more present in this marriage than I've ever been?" Clara felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "I heard you, Adrian. That night before you left for London, I heard you say her name in your sleep. I heard the way you still mourn her. You have no right. I have every right. I'm your wife. Or I'm supposed to be." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "But I can't be your wife when you're still married to a ghost." Adrian turned away, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Eleanor was... she was everything. I know. And when she died, everything died with her. I know that too. Clara's chest ached. But Adrian, I'm not dead. I'm right here. I've been right here for 2 years, and you've looked through me like I'm the ghost. He didn't respond. Didn't turn around. Clara waited, hoping for something, an acknowledgement, an apology, anything. But the silence stretched on, familiar and suffocating. Finally, she spoke. I'm leaving. That made him turn. What? I'm leaving Iron Ridge. I don't know if it's temporary or permanent yet. But I can't stay here and keep disappearing. You can't just leave. Yes, I can. Watch me. Clara moved toward the door. I'll send word when I've decided what comes next. Until then, you can have your house back. You can mourn Eleanor in peace. You can pretend I never existed, which is what you've been doing anyway. She reached for the door handle. Clara. She stopped but didn't turn around. Don't do this, Adrian said, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Fear, maybe, or the first crack in his carefully maintained armor. You did this, Clara said quietly. 2 years ago, when you decided I wasn't worth knowing. I'm just finally accepting what you decided back then. She opened the door and walked out, leaving Adrian alone in his cold study. Clara made it to her chambers before the shaking started. Mary was waiting, already packing a trunk. How did you know? Clara whispered. Heard shouting. Figured you'd need this. Mary folded another dress carefully. Where will you go? Lady Patricia's for now. Then, I don't know, maybe back to my family's estate, maybe London. Somewhere I can remember who I was before I became the ghost Duchess. They packed in silence, moving quickly. Clara took only what was hers. The clothes Mrs. Delacroix had made, her sketchbooks and paints, the few personal items she'd brought from her old life. The jewelry Adrian had given her, beautiful, expensive, meaningless, she left in their boxes. Dawn was breaking when Clara's carriage pulled away from Iron Ridge Manor. She looked back once at the gray stone walls, the empty windows, the cold perfection of it all. Then she looked forward and didn't look back again. Lady Patricia took her in without questions, installing Clara in a sunny guest room and letting her sleep for 12 hours straight. When Clara finally woke, Patricia was there with tea and toast and the kind of matter-of-fact sympathy that didn't require words. You can stay as long as you need, Patricia said simply. Thank you. And for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm falling apart. That's what brave looks like from the inside. Patricia squeezed her hand. It's easy to be composed when nothing's at stake. You're brave because you're terrified and doing it anyway. The news spread like wildfire. Within days, everyone in the county knew that the Duchess of Blackwell had left her husband. The gossip was vicious and varied. Some said Clara had run off with a lover, others that she'd gone mad, still others that Adrian had thrown her out. The truth, boring and complicated, interested no one. Clara received letters, dozens of them. Her mother wrote begging her to return to Adrian immediately before the scandal became permanent. Her father wrote threatening to cut off her allowance if she didn't stop this nonsense. Several so-called friends wrote with advice that boiled down to apologize and submit. But there were other letters too. Women Clara barely knew, writing to say they understood, to say they'd thought about leaving their own suffocating marriages but lacked the courage, to say that watching Clara walk away had made them wonder if they could too. Those letters kept Clara from breaking completely. She painted furiously during her time at Patricia's house, channeling everything into canvas and color, anger and grief and fear and something that felt almost like hope. She painted until her hands cramped, until Patricia physically removed the brushes and made her sleep. You can't create your way out of this, Patricia said gently. I have to do something. You've already done it. You left. Now you just have to figure out what comes next. What came next arrived 10 days after Clara had left Iron Ridge. She was in Patricia's garden trying to paint the winter roses when Mary appeared on the path. The maid looked terrified. Clara, you need to come inside, right now. Clara's stomach dropped. What happened? Just come." In Patricia's sitting room, a man Clara didn't recognize was waiting. He was older, well-dressed, with the careful neutrality of someone who dealt in unpleasant business. "Your Grace," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm Mr. Thornbury, solicitor for the Duke of Blackwell." Clara's blood went cold. "What do you want?" "I've been instructed by His Grace to deliver this." He held out a sealed document. Clara took it with shaking hands. The legal language was dense, but the meaning became clear quickly enough. Adrian wanted a divorce. The room tilted. Clara sat down hard. "This is highly irregular," Mr. Thornbury continued in his professional monotone. "Divorces require an act of Parliament and are rarely granted. However, His Grace is prepared to claim desertion and abandonment. With your departure from Iron Ridge and your questionable behavior prior to leaving, he believes he has grounds." "Questionable behavior," Clara repeated numbly. "The ball you hosted without his permission, the removal of your wedding ring, the public confrontation. Several witnesses can testify to behavior unbecoming of a duchess." Clara felt Patricia's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "And if I contest this," Clara asked, "then it becomes a public trial. Your conduct will be examined in detail. So will the Duke's. The scandal will be extraordinary. Your reputation will be destroyed regardless of the outcome." "Her reputation?" Patricia interjected sharply. "What about his? 2 years of neglect, of treating his wife like furniture, can be explained as a private matter between husband and wife," Mr. Thornbury said smoothly. "Whereas Her Grace's actions were very public. I'm simply explaining how such a case would be perceived. He was right, and they all knew it. A woman leaving her husband, no matter the reason, would always be judged more harshly than a man ignoring his wife. His Grace is offering generous terms," the solicitor continued. "You would retain your dowry and receive an annual income. You would be permitted to live quietly on one of the smaller estates. In exchange, you would not contest the divorce or speak publicly about the marriage." Clara stared at the document. This was it, her escape, served on a silver platter. She could be free of Adrian, free of Iron Ridge, free of the whole suffocating mess. So why did it feel like losing? "I need time to think," she said. "His Grace requests an answer within 1 week." "Then he'll have to wait. I'm not making this decision while I'm still in shock." Mr. Thornbury's lips thinned, but he nodded. "As you wish, Your Grace. I'll return in 7 days." After he left, Clara sat in silence while Patricia paced angrily. "The bastard," Patricia muttered. "He ignores you for 2 years, then uses your perfectly reasonable response as grounds for divorce. It's monstrous. It's legal." "Legal doesn't mean right." Clara looked down at the document in her hands. "He's letting me go. Isn't this what I wanted? Freedom?" "Is it?" Patricia stopped pacing. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like him punishing you for daring to exist too loudly." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the divorce papers, about Adrian's face when he'd seen her at the ball, about the 2 years of silence that had brought them to this point. She thought about Eleanor, too. The woman in the portrait, frozen in permanent joy. The woman Adrian had loved and lost and never stopped mourning. And she thought about herself, the woman who'd removed her ring, thrown a ball, and finally stopped being invisible. The woman Adrian was now trying to erase legally, since he'd failed to erase her emotionally. Dawn came gray and cold. Clara dressed and asked Patricia's driver to take her into the village. She had letters to write, decisions to make, a future to build from the wreckage of her marriage. But first she had to figure out what she actually wanted. The village was quiet this early, shops just opening, a few people on the street. Clara walked without destination, just moving, trying to think. She passed the church and stopped. Not to pray. She'd given up on prayers 2 years ago when they'd gone unanswered. But the churchyard was peaceful, and she needed peace. Clara walked among the headstones, reading names and dates of people who'd loved and died and been mourned. She wondered if anyone visited Eleanor's grave, if Adrian did. "Thought I'd find you here." Clara spun around. Adrian stood at the edge of the churchyard, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His coat was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his face drawn. "How did you know where I was?" Clara demanded. "Lady Patricia's staff talks. I may be a terrible husband, but I'm still a duke. People tell me things." He took a step closer. "We need to talk." Your solicitor already said everything that needed saying. That wasn't me talking. That was lawyers and duty and... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. That was me being a coward. Again. Clara stared at him. What do you want, Adrian? I don't know, he said, and the raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. But I know I don't want this. The divorce, the scandal, the ending, I don't want it to end like this. Then how do you want it to end? I don't want it to end at all. The words hung between them, fragile and impossible. You sent divorce papers, Clara said carefully. You can't unsend them. I know, I panicked. You left, and I... Adrian ran a hand through his hair. For 2 years I told myself I was fine with how things were, that keeping distance was easier than trying again, than risking caring and losing again. And then you left, and the house was empty, and I realized... He stopped, looking away. Realized what? Clara pressed. That I can't even remember your face. The confession hit Clara like a slap. Not angry, just devastatingly honest. I've looked through you for so long, Adrian continued, that when you were actually gone, I had no idea what I'd lost. I tried to picture you, your face, your voice, the way you move, and I couldn't. 2 years married, and I don't know my own wife. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. That's not love, Adrian. That's guilt. I know. He finally met her eyes. But it's the first honest thing I've felt since Eleanor died. And I don't know if that's enough, or if it's too late, or if I'm even capable of being the husband you deserve. But I know that letting you go without trying is the most cowardly thing I could do. You already let me go. The divorce papers, burn them. Tell my solicitor to burn them. I'll fire him. I'll do whatever it takes. Adrian moved closer, and Clara could see the desperation in his eyes. Just don't disappear. Don't let me prove that I'm exactly the monster you think I am. Clara wanted to believe him. Every part of her that had loved the idea of marriage, of partnership, of being seen, all those parts wanted to say yes. But she'd spent 2 years hoping for exactly this moment, and it had never come. Why should she believe it was real now? Words are easy, she said. You want me to believe you've changed? Then prove it. How? I don't know. That's your job to figure out. Clara started walking away. Clara, wait! She stopped but didn't turn around. I'm staying at Lady Patricia's. If you actually mean any of this, you know where to find me. But Adrian, next time you look for me, make sure you're actually ready to see me. She walked away, leaving him standing alone in the churchyard. And for the first time since she'd removed her ring, Clara didn't know if she'd just made the bravest decision of her life or the biggest mistake. 3 days passed with no word from Adrian. Clara told herself she didn't care. She painted during the day, violent, angry strokes that left her exhausted, and sat with Lady Patricia in the evenings, pretending to read while her mind spun in circles. The divorce papers sat on the writing desk in her room, unsigned, a constant reminder of the choice she had to make. On the 4th day, Mary burst into the sitting room where Clara was attempting to sketch. He's here! Clara's pencil skidded across the page. Who? The Duke. He's at the front door, with... Well, you should probably see for yourself. Clara's heart lurched, but she forced herself to move slowly, deliberately. She wouldn't run to him like some desperate woman. If Adrian wanted to talk, he could wait. When she reached the entrance hall, she stopped dead. Adrian stood on the doorstep, soaking wet from a rainstorm Clara hadn't even noticed starting. But that wasn't what made her freeze. It was what he was carrying, her paintings, all of them. The ones she'd left behind at Iron Ridge, stacked carefully and wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from the rain. What are you doing? Clara asked. Adrian looked up, water dripping from his hair. You said prove it, so I'm proving it. By stealing my paintings? By returning them. You left them behind. I assumed you didn't want them anymore. He shifted the stack, struggling with the weight. But I looked at them, really looked. And Clara, You're extraordinary. Clara's throat tightened. You looked at my paintings. Every single one. Spent 2 days in that studio you set up, just looking. Adrian's voice was rough. The dining room, the empty chairs, the view from your window. I saw what you were painting, Clara. I saw what I did to you. Lady Patricia appeared from somewhere behind Clara. Well, don't just stand there gawking. Bring them inside before they're ruined. Adrian carried the paintings in, water pooling on Patricia's expensive floors. The old woman didn't even flinch, just directed him to set them down carefully. Now, Patricia said briskly, I'm going to give you two exactly 1 hour. After that, I'm throwing him out regardless. Understood? Patricia, Clara started. 1 hour. Don't waste it. She swept from the room, closing the door behind her with pointed firmness. Clara stood frozen, staring at the man who'd been her husband in name only, now dripping on the carpet and looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. I don't know how to do this, Adrian said finally. I don't know how to be what you need. But I'm trying to learn. By looking at my paintings. By actually seeing you. He gestured to the canvases. These aren't just paintings, Clara. They're a record of everything I missed, everything I was too blind and too cowardly to notice. Clara moved closer to the paintings, seeing them with fresh eyes. The loneliness in every brushstroke. The anger in the color choices. The slow disappearance of hope as the chronology progressed. This one, Adrian said, touching the edge of the canvas showing the dining room, this one broke me, because I remember that dinner. I remember sitting there thinking about estate business while you sat at the other end of that table trying to make conversation, and I shut you down with one-word answers because it was easier than engaging, easier than risking anything real. Why was it easier? Clara demanded. What was so terrifying about talking to me? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Because talking to you meant admitting you were real, that you existed, that you had feelings and needs and deserved better than what I was giving you. And if I admitted all that, I'd have to face what a complete bastard I was being. So you just didn't look. I didn't look. He met her eyes. Eleanor died, and I decided the solution was to never let anyone that close again. Never risk that pain. Your family needed the alliance, my family needed an heir, and I thought I could just go through the motions without actually participating. Marry you, but keep you at arm's length. Have the legal benefits without the emotional risk. That's not a marriage, Clara said. That's a business arrangement. I know that now. I didn't let myself know it then. Adrian raked a wet hand through his hair. I told myself I was being practical, protecting myself. But really, I was just being cruel. And the cruelty was easier to ignore when I didn't actually look at the person I was hurting. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. You sent divorce papers, Adrian. You were going to end this without ever actually trying. I panicked. You left and everyone was talking, and my solicitor said it would be the cleanest solution. Cut ties, move on, pretend it never happened. He laughed bitterly. That's what I'm good at, apparently. Pretending things don't exist. So what changed? I went back to Iron Ridge after I saw you at the churchyard, sat in that empty house and tried to imagine going back to how things were before you. Just me and the silence and Eleanor's ghost. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. And I realized I couldn't do it. The house felt wrong without you, not because I love you. I don't know if I'm even capable of that anymore, but because you made it feel less like a tomb. It wasn't a declaration of love, it wasn't even close, but it was honest, and Clara had learned to value honesty more than pretty words. That's not enough, she said quietly. Wanting me around because I make your loneliness less oppressive, that's not enough to rebuild a marriage. I know. Adrian looked down at his hands. But it's a start. It's the first time I've wanted anything besides numbness in 3 years. What do you want from me, Adrian? Really? A chance. He met her eyes. A real one. To start over. To actually get to know my own wife. To stop hiding behind grief and distance and cowardice. And if I say no, if I sign those papers and walk away, Adrian's jaw tightened. Then I'll know I destroyed the one good thing I had left because I was too damaged to recognize it. And I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I deserved exactly that. The rain hammered against the windows. Clara could hear Patricia moving around upstairs, probably timing the hour with military precision. I don't trust you, Clara said. I don't blame you. And I won't go back to Iron Ridge and pretend everything's fine. I won't be the invisible wife again. I'm not asking you to be. Adrian took a careful step closer. I'm asking for the chance to see you, really see you. And if that means you stay here for now If that means I have to court my own wife like we're strangers meeting for the first time, then that's what I'll do. Clara studied his face, looking for the lie. But all she saw was exhaustion and something that might have been hope, fragile as spun glass. 1 month, she said. Adrian blinked. What? You have 1 month to prove this isn't just panic or guilt or temporary conscience. 1 month to show me you're actually willing to change. I'll take it. I'm not making this easy for you. You want to know me? Then actually put in the effort. Don't just show up with grand gestures and expect me to swoon. Do the work. Tell me how. Clara felt something shift in her chest. He was asking, actually asking instead of assuming or ignoring. Talk to me, she said. Not at me, not around me. With me. Tell me things that matter. Ask me things you actually want to know the answers to. Stop treating conversation like an obligation and start treating it like a bridge. A bridge, Adrian repeated, between two people who live on opposite sides of a canyon. Clara gestured between them. That's what we are right now, separated. You want to fix this? Then build the bridge, one conversation at a time. Adrian nodded slowly. When can I start? Not today. Today you've used up your hour. As if summoned, Patricia's footsteps sounded on the stairs. But you can come back tomorrow for tea, 3 o'clock. I'll be here. Patricia swept back into the room. Time's up, Your Grace. Out you go. Adrian looked at Clara one more time, something unreadable in his expression, then nodded and left. Clara watched through the window as he climbed into his carriage and disappeared down the drive. Well? Patricia asked. I don't know, Clara admitted. Maybe he means it. Maybe he doesn't. But I'm tired of guessing what people mean. If he wants me to believe him, he's going to have to show me. Good girl. That night, Clara lay awake thinking about bridges and canyons and whether some gaps were too wide to cross. She thought about the paintings Adrian had carried through the rain, about the fact that he'd spent 2 days looking at them instead of dismissing them as women's hobbies. She thought about the raw honesty in his voice when he'd admitted he didn't know how to love anymore. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. A crack in the armor. A possibility. Clara wasn't sure if that was enough, but she was willing to find out. Adrian arrived the next day at exactly 3 o'clock, rain-free this time, carrying flowers that looked like he'd actually chosen them instead of having a servant grab whatever was available. Peonies, Clara said, surprised. I asked Mary what you liked. She said you used to keep them in your room before... He trailed off. Before I stopped caring about anything that brought me joy, Clara finished. Yes, I love peonies. They sat in Patricia's garden room, tea cooling between them while rain pattered against the glass. For a long moment, neither spoke. This is harder than I thought, Adrian admitted. What is? Talking. Actually talking. I've spent so long avoiding it that I don't remember how to start. Clara poured tea, considering. Start with something true. Something true, Adrian thought. I'm terrified. Of what? Of being inadequate. Of trying and still failing, of proving that I'm exactly as broken as I think I am. He accepted the teacup but didn't drink. Eleanor and we grew up together, childhood friends who became more. Conversation was easy because we had shared history, shared language. I never had to explain myself because she already knew. And with me, you have to actually communicate, Clara said. Yes, and that feels exposing. Good. Clara met his eyes. You should feel exposed. I've felt exposed for 2 years while you stayed safely behind your walls. Welcome to vulnerability. It's uncomfortable. Adrian almost smiled. You're not going to make this easy. I told you I wouldn't. Fair enough. He set down his cup. Ask me something. Anything. I'll answer honestly. Clara thought. There were 1,000 questions she could ask. About Eleanor, about his family, about why he'd treated her so coldly. But she chose something different. What do you do at night when you can't sleep? Adrian looked surprised. I read. Usually law texts or estate management books. Things that are boring enough to eventually knock me out. That's depressing. What do you do? I used to lie there wondering what I'd done wrong. Now I paint or sketch or go walk the grounds until I'm tired enough to drop. You walk alone at night? Who's going to stop me? The servants? They're scared of me now that I've gone rogue. Clara sipped her tea. Your turn. Ask me something. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Why did you start painting again? Because I needed to create something. I was disappearing into nothing, and painting was the only way to prove I still existed. Every brushstroke was evidence that I was real. The paintings are brutal, Adrian said. Angry. I was angry. Still am, honestly. At me. Yes, but also at myself for accepting it for so long, for believing that being a good wife meant erasing myself. Clara set down her cup. I'm not erasing myself anymore. If that makes me difficult or scandalous or unsuitable as a duchess, then so be it. It makes you human, Adrian said quietly, which is more than I've been for a long time. They talked for 2 hours. Nothing earth-shattering, just small truths traded back and forth like currency. Adrian told her about his father's death, the pressure to maintain the family name, the expectations that had crushed him long before Eleanor's accident. Clara told him about growing up as the youngest daughter, always trying to prove she mattered, always feeling invisible even before the marriage. We're both good at disappearing, Adrian observed. Yes, but I'm done with it. When he left, Clara felt exhausted, but also something else. Lighter, maybe. Like the burden of carrying all the silence alone had been shared, just a little. Adrian came back the next day. And the next. And the next. Some visits were easier than others. Some days they talked for hours. Other days they sat in uncomfortable silence, both trying and failing to bridge the gap. There were moments when Clara wanted to scream at him, to drag up every hurt from the past 2 years and throw it in his face. And moments when Adrian retreated behind his walls, old habits dying hard. But he kept coming back. On the 6th day, Clara took him to her makeshift studio at Patricia's house, a converted sunroom filled with half-finished canvases. You've been busy, Adrian said, looking around. Painting keeps me sane. Clara picked up a brush, considering a landscape she'd started that morning. Or as sane as I can be, given everything. Adrian moved closer to one of the finished pieces, a portrait of Lady Patricia laughing, her whole face alight with fierce joy. This is remarkable. You captured her perfectly. She's been good to me, better than my own family. Clara added a stroke of blue to her landscape. My mother still won't speak to me. Says I'm an embarrassment. I'm sorry. Don't be. At least now I know where I stand with her. Conditional love based on social acceptance isn't actually love. Adrian was quiet, studying the paintings. Do you have any of Eleanor? The question caught Clara off guard. What? Paintings of Eleanor. Or inspired by her. You painted everything else at Iron Ridge. Clara set down her brush. No, I avoided the portrait gallery. Seemed masochistic to paint the woman my husband loved more than me. I don't love her more than you. Adrian, I don't love her at all anymore. I love the memory of who she was, the idea of her, but the actual person. She's been gone so long I can barely remember her voice. Adrian turned to face Clara. I've been mourning an idea for 3 years, using it as an excuse to avoid living. And now? Now I'm trying to stop, trying to put down the grief and pick up something else. I don't know if I'm succeeding, but I'm trying. Clara studied his face, looking for deception, but he just looked tired and honest and maybe a little bit broken. Paint her, Adrian said suddenly. What? Paint Eleanor. However you see her, I think I need to see her through someone else's eyes, someone who isn't drowning in nostalgia. That's a strange request. Probably, but I'm asking anyway. So Clara did. She didn't use the portrait in the gallery as reference. Instead, she painted based on Adrian's descriptions, on the stories he finally started telling, about Eleanor as a child climbing trees and scraping knees, as a young woman with opinions that scandalized her family, as a person who'd been complicated and real instead of perfect. The painting took 3 days. When Clara finished, Eleanor looked vibrant and alive, but also flawed. A crooked smile, shrewd eyes, dirt under her fingernails from gardening. Human, real. Not a saint or a ghost, just a woman who'd lived and loved and died too young. Adrian stared at it for a long time when Clara showed him. That's not how I remember her. he finally said. I know, but it's closer to who she actually was, based on what you told me. I turned her into something she wasn't, something impossible to live up to, even for her. Adrian's voice was rough. I made her into a ghost and then married that ghost instead of you. Yes. I'm sorry, Clara. I'm so deeply sorry. I know you are. No. Clara put down her brush. But sorry doesn't fix 2 years of damage. Sorry is just words. I need actions. Tell me what actions. I'll do them. Clara turned to face him fully. Come back to reality. Stop living in the past. Stop using grief as a shield. Actually be present in your own life instead of sleepwalking through it. I'm trying. Try harder. Clara's voice was firm, but not cruel. Because right now, you're half here and half somewhere else, and I can't build a marriage with half a person. I need all of you or none of you. Choose. The words hung between them like a challenge. Adrian looked at the painting again, at Eleanor's too real face, at the evidence that his perfect memory had been a fiction. All of me, he said quietly. I choose all of me. Prove it. How? Clara thought, then made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. Take down her portrait, the one in the gallery at Iron Ridge. Put it in storage or give it to her family, but stop displaying it like a shrine. Let her rest, Adrian. Actually, let her go. Adrian went pale. Clara, that's too much? Too fast? Clara shook her head. You asked what actions you could take. That's one. You want me to believe you're ready to move forward? Then stop living in a museum dedicated to your past. And if I can't? Then we're done here. Sign the divorce papers and I'll build a life somewhere you're not haunting it. Clara's voice was steady. I'm not competing with a dead woman anymore. Either choose the living or stay married to a ghost. Adrian stared at her, and Clara could see the war happening behind his eyes, the grip of old grief versus the possibility of new life, the safe numbness of memory versus the risky mess of reality. Finally, he nodded. I'll do it. When? Today. Now, before I lose my nerve. They rode back to Iron Ridge together, an hour-long journey in tense silence. Clara hadn't been back since she'd left nearly a month ago. The manor looked the same, cold, gray, imposing. But something felt different. Or maybe Clara felt different, and the house was just reflecting it. The servants seemed shocked to see them arrive together. Mary's eyes went wide when Clara walked through the door with Adrian beside her instead of behind her. Adrian led Clara to the portrait gallery without speaking. They stood in front of Eleanor's painting, the golden hair, the laughing eyes, the frozen perfection. I had this commissioned a year after she died, Adrian said. Couldn't bear that the memories were fading, so I tried to capture them in paint. But I made her too perfect, too idealized. The real Eleanor was sharp-tongued and stubborn and got mud on everything. She would have hated this portrait. Then why keep it? Because letting it go felt like killing her all over again. Clara took his hand, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him in months. She's already gone, Adrian. This is just a painting. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. Then he called for the staff. Take this down, he told them, gesturing to Eleanor's portrait. Store it carefully, but remove it from the gallery. Today. The servants looked at each other uncertainly. This portrait had hung here for 3 years. It was as much a part of Iron Ridge as the stones themselves. Now, Adrian said more firmly. They scrambled to obey. Clara watched as 4 men carefully lifted the massive portrait from the wall. There was a rectangular shadow where it had hung, evidence of its long presence, now just an outline. The men carried it away, and the wall looked bare and strange without it. It feels wrong, Adrian said. Wrong how? Empty, but also lighter. He looked at Clara. Is that terrible? No, it's honest. They walked through the rest of the gallery together. Adrian told her about the other portraits, his grandparents, great-aunts and uncles, family members who'd lived and died and left their faces on canvas. People who'd been real once, then became just images. We should get a portrait of you, Adrian said suddenly. Clara laughed. What? You're the Duchess of Blackwell. You should be in this gallery, not hiding in the East Wing, not invisible. Here, present. I don't know if I want my face on these walls. Why not? Because what if I leave? What if this month of trying doesn't work? Then my portrait would be here like a ghost too. Adrian stopped walking. Do you think we won't work? Clara considered the question honestly. I don't know. We're trying. That's more than we had before. But trying doesn't guarantee success. No, but not trying guarantees failure. Adrian faced her fully. I've failed you for 2 years, Clara. Completely and spectacularly failed. I can't undo that. But I can try not to fail going forward. And if that's not enough, if you decide you're done anyway, then at least I'll know I actually tried. And if I stay, if we somehow make this work, then we build something new. Not the marriage we had, but the one we should have had from the beginning. Partners instead of strangers. Equals instead of duke and decoration. I was never decoration. I know that now. Adrian's voice was soft. I see you now, Clara. Finally. And you're magnificent. Clara's throat tightened. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not promising perfection. I'm promising effort. I'm promising to actually show up for my own life, for our life, if you'll let me. Before Clara could answer, Mary appeared in the hallway, looking flustered. Your Grace, both of you, you have visitors. Who? Adrian asked. Lord and Lady Haversham, Lord Pemberton, the vicar and his wife, and, well, about a dozen others. They're all in the drawing room. They say they heard rumors you were both here and wanted to... Mary hesitated. They wanted to see if it was true. Clara and Adrian looked at each other. The vultures have arrived, Clara said dryly. Let them wait. No. Clara straightened her shoulders. Let's go down together. Face them together. Show them we're not ashamed. You want to give them a show? I want to show them we're both real people, not just sources of gossip. Clara started toward the drawing room. Come on. The drawing room fell silent when they entered. 12 faces turned toward them, expressions ranging from curious to scandalized to predatory. Mrs. Haversham sat in the center like a judge awaiting trial. Well, the old woman said, aren't you going to explain yourselves? Explain what? Clara asked pleasantly. This entire disaster, the ball, the separation, the divorce rumors. You've made a spectacle of this family. Adrian stepped forward. We've made a spectacle, Mrs. Haversham, because we stopped pretending. If that offends you, you're welcome to leave. The room went dead quiet. Lord Pemberton cleared his throat. Your Grace, we're simply concerned. The gossip has been quite vicious, and you all participated in it, Clara interjected. Don't pretend this is concern. You came here to see if we'd tear each other apart for your entertainment. How dare you suggest, Mrs. Haversham started. I dare because I'm done being polite. Clara felt Adrian's presence beside her, solid and supportive. You all watched me disappear for 2 years. You saw me eating dinner alone at assemblies while my husband ignored me. You watched me slowly erase myself to fit into the role of perfect, invisible Duchess. And not one of you asked if I was all right. That's a private matter between husband and wife, the vicar's wife said primly. Then keep it private, Adrian said. Stop coming to our home demanding explanations for things that don't concern you. My wife and I are working on our marriage. That's all anyone needs to know. Your wife ran away. My wife left because I gave her no reason to stay, Adrian cut in sharply. I ignored her, dismissed her, treated her like furniture. She did what any intelligent person would do. She refused to accept it. And instead of blaming her for having self-respect, maybe you should ask why we're all so comfortable with women suffering in silence. The room erupted in scandalized whispers. Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Adrian was defending her, actually defending her, publicly, against people whose opinions he'd always valued. This is outrageous, Mrs. Haversham spluttered. Yes, it is, Clara agreed. It's outrageous that I had to leave my own home to be noticed. It's outrageous that women are expected to endure unhappiness quietly. It's outrageous that you all came here hoping for drama instead of showing actual compassion. So if you'll excuse us, the Duke and I have better things to do than feed your gossip. She turned and walked out. Behind her, she heard Adrian's footsteps following. They didn't stop until they reached the library. Adrian's sanctuary, now shared. The door closed behind them, muffling the voices from the drawing room. That felt good, Adrian said. Terrifying. But yes, good. Clara laughed, slightly hysterical. We just told half the county to mind their own business. We did, together. Clara looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since their wedding day, she saw not just a distant duke or a grieving widower, but a man trying to become something better. We're really doing this, she said, trying to make this work. If you're willing. Clara thought about the paintings, about the bridge they'd started building, about the way he'd defended her in front of people who terrified him, about Eleanor's portrait, finally taken down. 1 month, she reminded him. You have 3 more weeks to prove this is real. I'll need longer than that, Adrian admitted. To completely change, to become the husband you deserve. That's going to take time. I know. Clara moved closer. But 3 weeks to prove you're actually trying? That I can measure. Adrian nodded. Then, hesitantly, he offered his hand. Clara took it. They stood there in the library, holding hands like children, while outside the manor, society buzzed with scandal and speculation. Let them talk. Claire had spent 2 years worrying about what people thought. She was done with that. All that mattered now was whether the man standing across from her could become the partner she needed. 3 weeks would tell. The 3 weeks that followed were the hardest of Clara's life. Not because Adrian failed, but because watching someone genuinely try to change was messy and uncomfortable, and nothing like the romantic fantasies she'd once harbored about marriage. He showed up every day. Some days he arrived with flowers or books he thought she'd like. Other days he came empty-handed and simply asked to sit with her while she painted. He was clumsy at conversation, often saying the wrong thing or retreating into silence when emotions got too complicated. But he kept coming back. Tell me about your childhood, Clara said one afternoon while sketching his profile. At his request, which had surprised her. Adrian shifted in his chair. It was lonely. My father was strict. My mother died when I was 8. After that, it was just tutors and expectations and learning how to be a proper duke. No friends. Eleanor, she lived on the neighboring estate. Her parents and mine were close, so we grew up together. She was the only person who didn't treat me like a title. Clara's pencil paused. And when she died? I became a title again, just a role to perform. Adrian looked at her. Until you refused to let me perform anymore. You made it easy to refuse. You were terrible at the role anyway. He almost smiled. Was I? You ignored your wife for 2 years. That's not exactly exemplary ducal behavior. No, it's cowardice dressed up as duty. Adrian was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about that dinner, the one you painted. I remember you asked me about riding to the southern woods, and I shut you down. I remember. What would you have said? If I'd actually gone with you? Clara set down her pencil. I don't know. Maybe nothing important. Maybe I just wanted to not be alone for a few hours. Maybe I wanted to see if we could find something to talk about besides estate business and weather. We could try now. Try what? Riding to the southern woods, see what we would have talked about if I hadn't been an ass. So they did. The next morning they rode out together, the first time they'd done anything together besides argue or sit in strained silence. The southern woods were bare of leaves, but beautiful in their starkness, all black branches against gray sky. They rode in silence at first, Clara waiting to see if Adrian would actually try or if this was just another gesture. I don't know how to do this, Adrian finally said. Do what? Be a husband. Be a partner. Eleanor and I never had to try. We just were. But with you, everything requires effort, and I'm constantly afraid I'm doing it wrong. You probably are doing it wrong, Clara said bluntly. I'm doing it wrong too. We're both terrible at this. That's comforting. It should be. It means we're even. Clara urged her horse forward. Stop comparing this to what you had with Eleanor. That was a different relationship with a different person in a different time. This is us now, trying to build something from rubble. Rubble I created. Yes, but I'm the one who left it as rubble for 2 years instead of demanding better. Clara looked at him. We're both responsible for the disaster, Adrian. You for ignoring me for accepting it. The question is whether we can build something new on top of it. They rode deeper into the woods. Adrian pointed out landmarks, a tree his father had planted, a stream where he'd played as a child, a clearing where Eleanor had once convinced him to have a picnic despite the mud. Clara noticed how every story circled back to Eleanor. "You need to make new memories," she said. "What?" "This whole estate is covered in ghosts for you. Everywhere you look, there's a story about your father or Eleanor or the past. You need new stories, ones that aren't about grief." Adrian considered this. "How do I do that?" "By living. By doing things that matter now instead of only remembering things that mattered then." Clara dismounted in the clearing he'd mentioned, like this spot. "You remember a picnic with Eleanor? Fine. Now make a new memory. We're here, it's cold, the ground is probably wet, but we're here together. That's a new story." Adrian dismounted slowly. "You want to have a picnic?" "No, but I want you to stop only seeing the past when you look around. I want you to see the present too. See me standing here instead of her ghost." "I do see you." "Do you?" Clara challenged. "Or do you see a substitute, a second chance, a way to make up for failing her?" "That's not... Isn't it? Be honest, Adrian. Are you trying to fix this marriage because you actually want me, or because losing another wife would prove you're as broken as you think you are?" The question hung between them like a blade. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "Both," he finally said. "It's both. I'm terrified of losing you because it would confirm every terrible thing I believe about myself. But Clara, I also want you. Not as Eleanor's replacement, not as a way to prove something. I want the woman who threw a ball to spite me, the woman who paints angry landscapes and tells society matrons to mind their own business, the woman who's brave enough to demand better and strong enough to walk away when she doesn't get it." Clara's throat tightened. "That's the best thing you've ever said to me." "It's true." "I know, that's why it's the best." They stood in the clearing for a long time, not touching, just existing in the same space, building a new memory on top of the old one. When they returned to the manor, Clara found a letter waiting from her mother. She almost didn't open it, expecting more recriminations. But curiosity won. "Clara, your father showed me the letter you wrote, the one where you refused to apologize for existing. I was angry at first. Then I read it again. And again. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I was invisible once too. When I married your father, his mother ran the household and I was expected to be decorative and silent. It took me 5 years to find my voice, and even then I was always careful, always worried about appearances. I thought I was teaching you how to survive marriage. I didn't realize I was teaching you how to disappear. I'm sorry for pushing you into that arrangement, for not asking if you were happy, for choosing reputation over your well-being. Your father says I should demand you come home. I think you should do whatever makes you feel real again." Mother Clara read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. It wasn't absolution. Her mother had still prioritized society over her daughter for 2 years. But it was acknowledgement. It was something. She showed Adrian the letter that evening. "Your mother is braver than mine was," he said after reading it. "My mother never questioned anything, just accepted her role and played it perfectly until it killed her." "How did she die?" "Fever, but really I think she died of exhaustion from maintaining appearances." Adrian handed back the letter. "She would have hated you." Clara blinked. "What?" "You're everything she wasn't. Loud when you need to be, honest even when it's uncomfortable, willing to fight instead of submit. She would have been scandalized by you." He smiled slightly. "I think that's one of the things I'm starting to love about you." Clara's heart stuttered. "Starting to love?" Adrian went still, like he'd surprised himself. "I didn't mean, that is, I'm not trying to." "Say it properly," Clara interrupted. Don't hide behind awkward deflection. If you meant it, say it properly." Adrian met her eyes. "I'm starting to love you. Not the idea of you, not the obligation. You. The real person. The one I was too blind to see before." "That's not the same as actually loving me." "I know, but it's honest." He took a careful step closer. "I spent 3 years loving a memory. I know what that feels like. Safe, static, unchanging. This feels different, dangerous. Like I could actually lose something real if I mess it up. And that terrifies me, but it also feels alive." Clara's hands trembled. Don't say things you might take back later. I won't take it back. It's the truest thing I've said in years. Before Clara could respond, Mary burst into the room, eyes wide. Your Grace, both of you, there's a crowd at the gate. A crowd? Adrian frowned. Villagers, tenants, people from the county. They're saying… Mary hesitated. They're saying they want to see the Duchess, that they heard she's back and they want to welcome her properly. Clara and Adrian exchanged glances. How many people? Clara asked. Dozens. Maybe more coming. Should I send them away? No. Clara stood. Let them in. All of them. Clara, Adrian started. You said I should be visible, that I should have a portrait in the gallery. Well, here's something better. Actual people who want to see me as more than decoration. She looked at him. Unless you'd rather I hide. No. No hiding. Adrian stood too. We'll face them together. They walked to the front of the manor to find not dozens, but what looked like 100 people gathered on the grounds. Tenants from the estate, shopkeepers from the village, families Clara had met at assemblies, even a few servants from neighboring manors. Lady Patricia stood at the front of the crowd, looking smug. What did you do? Clara asked her. I may have mentioned to a few people that you'd returned to Ironridge, and that you'd been treated abominably, and that anyone with decency might want to show their support. Patricia smiled. I didn't expect quite this many, but apparently you've inspired people. An older woman stepped forward, Mrs. Fletcher, who ran the bakery in the village. Your Grace, we wanted you to know we're glad you're back. What you did, standing up to that horrible Haversham woman and demanding to be treated proper, it meant something to those of us who can't do the same. I'm just trying to survive my own marriage, Clara said. Exactly. And you're doing it without apologizing for existing. That's radical for women like us. Mrs. Fletcher gestured to the crowd. Half these women are in marriages where they're invisible too. Watching you refuse it, that gave us hope. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I didn't mean to start anything. Too late, Lady Patricia said cheerfully. You're a symbol now, the Duchess who wouldn't disappear. Accept it. Adrian stepped forward. You're all welcome at Ironridge. My wife, he emphasized the word, is an extraordinary woman, and I failed to see that for too long. But I see it now, and anyone who wants to know her, actually know her, is welcome here. The crowd erupted in applause. Clara reached for Adrian's hand without thinking, and he took it, their fingers intertwining in front of everyone. Over the next week, Ironridge transformed. Clara invited the women from the crowd to tea. Not formal, stiff affairs, but real gatherings where they talked about books and art and the frustrations of being expected to be decorative. She commissioned portraits not just of herself, but of the tenants and villagers, preserving their faces and stories alongside the aristocratic ghosts in the gallery. Adrian watched it all with something like wonder. You're changing this place, he said one evening as they walked the halls together, a new habit they'd developed. It needed changing. It was a museum. Now it's becoming a home. I never knew it could be this. That's because you never let anyone actually live here, including yourself. Clara stopped in front of the empty space where Eleanor's portrait had hung. Have you decided what to do with this wall? I thought we could commission something new, something that represents now instead of then. Like what? Adrian looked at her. Us, together, a portrait of both of us. Not separate, not miles apart, but together, equal. Clara's breath caught. That's remarkably symbolic. I'm trying to learn symbolism. You're teaching me. He smiled slightly. Is it working? Maybe. They commissioned the portrait the next day. The artist, a woman from London that Lady Patricia recommended, spent hours studying them, sketching possibilities. Most couples want to look perfect, she said. Idealized. Do you want that? No, Clara said firmly. I want real. Real can be uncomfortable. Good. Comfortable hasn't served us well. The artist painted them standing side by side, not touching but clearly together. Adrian looked less like a remote duke and more like a man mid-transformation, uncertain but trying. Clara looked fierce, holding a paintbrush instead of flowers, her ring finger visible and bare. You're not wearing your ring in the painting, Adrian observed when they saw the preliminary sketch. I haven't put it back on yet. Because you don't trust me. Because I'm not ready to wear a symbol of something we're still building. Clara studied the sketch. When I put it back on, if I put it back on, it needs to mean something real, not duty or obligation, choice. When you're ready, Adrian said quietly, I'll be here. The 3-week deadline arrived on a Tuesday. Clara woke knowing this was the day she'd promised to make her decision. Stay and try to build something real with Adrian, or leave and build a life somewhere else. She'd expected to wake with clarity, with certainty one way or the other. Instead, she just felt tired. She found Adrian in the library, already awake despite the early hour. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the fear in his eyes. It's been 3 weeks, she said. I know. You've kept your promises. You've shown up, told the truth, changed things that needed changing. You've been trying. But it's not enough, Adrian said, reading her tone. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I can see it in your face. He stood, looking resigned. It's all right, Clara. I understand. Some damage can't be repaired no matter how hard you try. Will you let me finish? Clara snapped. I swear, you're the most dramatic man I've ever met, always assuming the worst. Adrian blinked. I'm not... What? Sit down and let me talk. He sat. Clara took a breath. 3 weeks ago, you asked for a chance to prove you were serious about changing. You've done that. You're not perfect. You still retreat sometimes, still compare everything to the past, still say the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. But you're trying, genuinely trying, and that matters. So you're staying. I'm saying I see the effort. But Adrian, effort isn't the same as success. We're not fixed. We're barely functional. We have years of damage to work through. And I'm not naive enough to think 3 weeks of trying erases 2 years of harm. Then what are you saying? Clara moved to stand in front of him. I'm saying I'm willing to keep trying. Not because I trust you completely. I don't. Not yet. Not because I've forgiven everything. I haven't. But because for the first time since our wedding, I believe we might actually become something real. And that possibility is worth fighting for. Adrian's eyes were bright. You're staying. On conditions. Anything. We keep talking, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. No more silence as a weapon. Agreed. We build new traditions, new memories. We stop letting the past define everything. Yes. And you accept that I'm not going to be a traditional Duchess. I'm going to paint and speak my mind and probably scandalize people regularly. If you need a perfect aristocratic wife, this won't work. I don't want perfect. I want you. Clara searched his face, looking for doubt, finding none. Then we try, she said. Really try. Both of us. Not 3 weeks, but however long it takes. Adrian stood slowly, carefully, like he was afraid sudden movement would shatter the moment. Can I hold you? The question surprised Clara. You're asking permission? I'm trying to do this right, to not assume. His voice was rough. Can I? Clara stepped into his arms. They wrapped around her cautiously at first, then tighter, like he was afraid she'd disappear. Clara pressed her face against his chest and let herself feel safe for the first time in 2 years. I'm sorry, Adrian whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. That's dramatic. I'm a dramatic man, apparently. She could hear the smile in his voice. You said so yourself. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other. It wasn't passion or romance or any of the things novels promised. It was just two broken people choosing to be broken together, to build something new from the pieces. Eventually, they pulled apart. Adrian kept hold of her hands. There's something I want to show you, he said. He led her upstairs to his chambers, a room Clara had never entered. It was sparse, almost monastic, with the same cold impersonality as his study. But on the desk sat a small wooden box. Adrian opened it. Inside was a ring, not the wedding band Clara had worn and removed, but something new, a simple gold band inlaid with small emeralds. Your birthstone, Adrian said. I had it made weeks ago. I wasn't sure if you'd ever wear it, but I wanted you to have the choice. The old ring represented duty and family obligation. This one represents choice, Us. What we're building. Clara stared at the ring. It was beautiful in its simplicity, nothing like the ostentatious Blackwell heirloom she'd worn before. It's too soon, she said. I know. That's why I'm not asking you to wear it now. I'm just showing you it exists, for when you're ready. If you're ever ready. Clara touched the ring gently. And if I'm never ready? Then I'll keep it in this box as a reminder of what I'm working toward. Adrian closed the lid. No pressure, no expectations, just a promise that when you're ready to choose us, I'll be here. Clara's eyes burned. You're getting better at this. At what? Saying the right thing. I've had a good teacher. They spent the rest of the day together, doing mundane things that felt revolutionary, walking the grounds, eating lunch without 12 feet of table between them, sitting in the library while Adrian read aloud and Clara sketched. Small moments that became building blocks. That evening, the completed portrait arrived. The artist had captured something Clara hadn't fully realized. The space between them was smaller than in the sketch. Like even as they'd sat for the painting, they'd unconsciously moved closer together. Adrian's expression was no longer just uncertain, but hopeful. Clara looked less fierce and more alive. We look like people who might survive this, Clara observed. We look like people who are choosing to survive this, Adrian corrected. That's different. They hung it where Eleanor's portrait had been. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Out with the past, in with the present. Clara half expected to feel guilty about displacing Eleanor so completely, but mostly she just felt relieved. Lady Patricia arrived the next day to admire the portrait and drink Clara's wine. You're really doing this, she said, actually trying to make this marriage work. Apparently. Are you happy? Clara thought about the question. I'm not miserable. That's a start. It's more than a start. It's a foundation. Patricia refilled her glass. Most marriages survive on much less. Maybe. But I don't want to just survive. I want something better. Greedy. Realistic. I've already survived 2 years of misery. I'm not signing up for 50 more. Fair enough. Patricia raised her glass. To being greedy. To demanding better. To refusing to disappear. Clara raised hers. To refusing to disappear. The weeks turned into months. Clara and Adrian stumbled frequently. Arguments flared over small things. Old hurts resurfaced without warning, and there were days when the gap between them felt impossibly wide again. But they kept talking, kept trying, kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Clara started hosting gatherings at Iron Ridge. Not formal balls, but real events where people actually talked to each other. Art salons where local women could display their work. Discussion groups about books and politics and ideas. The manor slowly transformed from a cold monument into something alive and messy and real. Adrian watched it all with wonder and occasional discomfort. He was used to control, to everything being precisely managed. Clara's chaos threatened that. You invited 30 people without telling me, he said one evening after a particularly lively salon. I invited 40, actually. 10 couldn't come. Clara, this is our home, Adrian. I'm going to use it. If that bothers you, we can negotiate. But I'm not going back to rattling around in silence. They negotiated. Clara agreed to give Adrian warning before large gatherings. Adrian agreed to stop treating the manor like a museum that needed protection from human touch. Compromise felt like progress. 6 months after Clara had removed her ring, she woke to find Adrian watching her. That's creepy, she said. Sorry, I'm trying to memorize you. Why? Because I wasted 2 years not looking. I'm making up for it. Clara propped herself up on one elbow. Somewhere along the way, she'd started sleeping in Adrian's chambers instead of her own. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when it had happened, just a gradual migration towards something that felt less lonely. What do you see? She asked. Someone stronger than I gave you credit for. Someone who refused to accept less than she deserved. Someone who's teaching me how to be human again. That's a lot of pressure. You handle pressure well. Adrian touched her face gently. I love you, Clara. Actually love you, not starting to or beginning to. I love you. Clara's breath caught. She'd been waiting for this moment, half dreading it because love felt like a trap she'd been caught in before. One-sided, desperate, suffocating. But this felt different. Say something, Adrian prompted when she didn't respond. I'm thinking. That's terrifying. Clara kissed him. A real kiss. Not the perfunctory ones they'd exchanged at their wedding. When she pulled back, Adrian looked dazed. Was that an answer? He asked. It was a placeholder while I find words. Clara sat up fully. I don't know if I love you yet. I want to. I'm getting close. But Adrian, you hurt me badly, and some part of me is still protecting itself. I understand. But I choose you. Every day I'm choosing you, and maybe that's more important than love right now. It's enough, Adrian said. More than enough. They spent the rest of the morning in bed, talking and kissing and slowly relearning each other. It wasn't perfect. They bumped noses, said awkward things, laughed at their own clumsiness. But it was real. And real was what they'd been missing all along. A year after Clara had thrown her ball, Lady Patricia hosted another one, this time explicitly in Clara's honor. Half the county came, including many of the women who'd been so scandalized by her behavior before. Mrs. Havisham approached Clara with thin-lipped formality. Your Grace, you seem well. I am well, Mrs. Havisham. Thank you for noticing. I feel I should apologize for my harsh words last year. I may have been hasty in my judgment. Clara studied the old woman. This was as close to an admission of wrong as she'd ever get. Apology accepted, though I'm curious what changed your mind. My granddaughter, Mrs. Havisham said stiffly. She's engaged to a man who treats her abominably, ignores her, dismisses her opinions, makes her feel small. I told her to accept it, that marriage requires sacrifice. She quoted your words back to me. Said you proved that demanding better wasn't hysterical, it was survival. Clara's chest tightened. Is she still going to marry him? No. She broke the engagement last week. Her parents are furious, but she said she'd rather be alone than invisible. Mrs. Havisham's expression flickered with something that might have been respect. You've caused quite a disruption, Your Grace. Good. Yes, well, Havisham nodded stiffly and walked away. Clara watched her go, feeling something settle in her chest. She hadn't just saved herself, she'd given other women permission to try. Adrian appeared at her elbow. What did the dragon want? To apologize, in her way, and to tell me I've corrupted her granddaughter. Have you? I certainly hope so. They danced together that night, properly this time, not the stilted formality of their wedding ball, but something real. Adrian held her close, and Clara let herself lean into him. Are you happy? He asked. I'm getting there. Are you? I'm terrified, Adrian admitted. Every day I wake up afraid I'll mess this up again, that you'll realize I'm not worth the effort. You are worth it, but Adrian, you're also exhausting. You know that, right? I'm getting that impression. Good, as long as you know. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. We're going to be okay. You sound certain. I am. We're both too stubborn to fail at this. 2 years after their wedding, exactly 2 years after the worst day of Clara's life had become the start of something better, Adrian asked her to come to the library. The ring box sat on the table between them. It's been 2 years, Adrian said. I know that's arbitrary, but it feels significant somehow. 2 years of doing this wrong, 2 years of trying to do it right. A balance. Clara stared at the box. Adrian, I'm not asking you to wear it. I'm just asking if you want to. If you're ready to choose this, us, with that kind of permanence. Clara opened the box. The emerald ring glinted in the lamplight, simple and beautiful, and nothing like the symbol of duty she'd worn before. If I put this on, she said slowly, it's not going back in the box. I'm not removing it the first time we argue or the first time you say something thoughtless. If I wear this, it's permanent. I know. And you're ready for that? For permanent? I'm terrified of it, Adrian said honestly. But yes, I'm ready. Clara lifted the ring from the box, turning it in her fingers. She thought about the ghost she'd been, the woman she'd become, the partnership they'd built from wreckage. Then she slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Adrian's breath caught. Does this mean It means I love you, Clara said. Finally, completely. I love the man you're becoming and the man you are right now, flaws and all. I love that you're trying. I love that you see me. Adrian pulled her close, and Clara felt tears on her cheeks. His or hers, she wasn't sure. Maybe both. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up, for demanding better, for refusing to disappear. Thank you for learning to see me. They stood there in the library, holding each other while the fire crackled and the manor settled around them. Outside, winter was giving way to spring. Inside, something that had been broken was finally, messily, imperfectly becoming whole. Clara looked at her hand, at the emerald ring catching the firelight, and smiled. It wasn't the marriage she'd imagined on her wedding day. It was better, harder, messier, more real. Built on truth instead of obligation, on choice instead of duty. And it was hers, theirs. Finally. 5 years later, Iron Ridge Manor had transformed completely. The portrait gallery now held not just aristocratic ancestors, but ordinary people. Tenants, servants, visitors, anyone whose story Clara thought deserved preserving. The ballroom hosted monthly gatherings where women could display art, discuss ideas, and support each other in ways society usually discouraged. Clara's studio in the East Wing had become legendary. People came from London to see her work, raw, emotional paintings that captured truth instead of flattery. She'd become known as the Duchess who painted reality, and while some still found her scandalous, most had learned to respect her. Adrian had changed too. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, and had learned to be present in his own life instead of haunting it. He still had bad days. Grief didn't disappear just because you decided to move forward, but he'd learned to share those days instead of drowning in them alone. They fought regularly. Clara was too opinionated and Adrian too set in his ways for smooth sailing. But they'd learned to fight fair, to apologize when wrong, to choose each other even when they were angry. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. On their 7th anniversary, Clara painted one final piece, a self-portrait showing the woman she'd become. Not a ghost, not invisible, but alive and fierce and undeniably present. She hung it in the gallery next to their wedding portrait, showing the distance she'd traveled. Adrian stood beside her, studying both paintings. The difference is remarkable, he said. I almost didn't survive becoming that first version. But you did. You survived, and you transformed. Adrian took her hand, her left hand, where the emerald ring had stayed for 5 years. You saved both of us. We saved each other, Clara corrected. I demanded better. You learned to give it. That's partnership. I love you. I know. I love you too. They walked through the manor together, past paintings and memories and the life they'd built from disaster. Past the ballroom where Clara had made her stand, past the dining room where they now ate together every night, past the chambers they shared. Outside, their children played in the gardens. 2 daughters who would never know what it meant to be invisible, because Clara would teach them to demand better from the start. Lady Patricia sat on the terrace, elderly now but still sharp as ever, watching the girls with satisfaction. You did good, she called to Clara. We did good, Clara corrected, gesturing between herself and Adrian. Fair enough. You're both less of a disaster than you were. Thanks for the glowing review, Patricia cackled and returned to her book. Clara leaned against the terrace railing, Adrian beside her, and looked out over the estate that had once been her prison and was now her home. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. Staying, fighting for this instead of leaving. Clara thought about the question honestly. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd signed those divorce papers. Where I'd be now. Who I'd be. And I think I'd be fine. I would have survived. She turned to face him. But I wouldn't have this messy, complicated, hard-won partnership, this life we built together. And as difficult as it's been, I don't regret it. Even the bad parts? Even those. Because the bad parts taught us how to do better. Adrian pulled her close, and Clara went willingly. They stood there watching their daughters play, watching the sun set over grounds that had witnessed their disaster and their recovery. Thank you, Adrian said quietly. For what? For refusing to disappear, For teaching me that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up even when it's hard. For being the bravest person I've ever known. Clara smiled against his chest. You're welcome. But Adrian? Yes? Stop thanking me like I did this alone. You showed up too. You changed. You earned this. We earned it. Yes, together. The girls shrieked with laughter in the garden. Patricia turned a page in her book. The manor glowed golden in the fading light. Clara looked at her emerald ring, at the man holding her, at the life they'd built from the ashes of the one they'd destroyed. And she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not because it had been easy, it hadn't. Not because they'd achieved some fairy tale ending, they hadn't. But because they'd both been brave enough to try, to fail, to try again. And in the end, that courage had changed everything.